If discipline actually worked, you wouldn't keep burning out. The problem isn't that you need more self control, you need more safety. My name is Elyssa Smith. I'm a trauma informed executive coach. And on today's episode of the Unlock Your Blocks podcast, we are unpacking why willpower fails high achievers and what to do instead. If you learned that the answer to every problem is to work harder, be better, do more, you have probably been pretty successful until you weren't. When a responsible daughter learns that she gets more of her needs met by being good or being nice or being the hardest worker in the room, it becomes a way of surviving. And our identity gets wrapped up in results and white knuckling it rather than gradually moving into success. So if you keep getting stuck, if you keep finding that you are resisting forward motion, if you are not able to make progress, and you feel like, oh, I just need to be more disciplined, that is actually flawed thinking, but it is probably part of the messaging you got growing up. You just need to work harder, is probably the message that you got. And if you're not working harder, then that makes you fill in the blank, lazy, or a failure, or somebody who's not a go-getter. And if that was your role, if you learned that the best way to get most of your needs met growing up was by being that high achiever, being that perfectionist, being the person that was always reliable. I was on a podcast earlier today. I was interviewed on someone's podcast, and we were talking about this concept about if you are the person that is expected to help in every situation, probably if you're the go-getter, if you're the perfectionist, if you're the high achiever, likely there are people in your world that have come to depend on you to be the person that can get them out of a tight spot, the person that they go to in an emergency, the person that they count on to always show up when she says she will, because they know that you have done that historically. And we learned that to not do that means that we're a failure or that we're lazy, which are the two big things we cannot be labeled when our worth comes from productivity as a kid. But discipline is like this scary word that kind of feels like, oh my gosh, I'm bad, and so I need to be more disciplined. But it's really not that, because discipline relies on override and ignoring your own needs, not cooperating with them, ignoring your body cues, ignoring your nervous system. This would have been a helpful survival technique in that childhood that we're referring to, where your worth comes from how much action you're taking, how much productivity you're creating, how much consistency you have that is based in stress, based in how reliable you are, based in you showing up when you say you will, and everything is all or nothing in that state. But we were not designed to be able to function in that way that is effort based, in that way that is stress and cortisol and adrenaline based for very long. And so when we're like, oh, I just need to be more disciplined, I just need to force it, I need to push it, every time you do that, you are making a choice to abandon your own self. Again, in childhood, this makes sense. We learn to abandon our own needs, our feelings, the idea that we have more needs than are allowed to be met. We have to abandon all of those parts of ourselves that want more, that need more, and adapt and get smaller and take up less space. We can only take up as much space as we're allowed to take up as kids. And you know in a lot of cases, the parents did their best and they tried to do better than their own parents had done, and it still falls short. Even those of us who are trauma informed executive coaches who are parenting little kids, my son's 11 now, man, there are so many gaps in my parenting, and I know a lot more than the average bear about these things and about attachment and about all this, the parenting stuff that's really important for kids' nervous systems. I know a lot about it. I've done a lot of really good things with him. And I always joke with him that, hey, I've got money saved for you, and you can use it for college or therapy. You have my full support in both directions. So even if your parents did their level best with you, there were still gaps, and there were still places where you interpreted silence or a parent not knowing how to work through their own emotions as a lack of permission for you to have any. So no matter what, we only took up the space that we felt was safe to take up. And typically it's dominated by self-abandonment on our part in order to choose working harder and reaching the goals that we thought would help us get the most out of that small space that we were confined to emotionally and maybe physically. Maybe your parents were telling you like, oh, well, you can't do these activities unless you get straight A's, whatever. So however that looked for you, and you feel like as an adult now, discipline is the answer. I just need to work harder and push through this. And why can't I do that anymore? Oh gosh, I had a client the other day. She was like, man, I run this, 7-figure business, and I have run bigger teams than I have right now. My team is smaller now than it has been. And I'm raising little kids, but like I used to be more successful and be able to do all of these things much better. Why am I struggling now all of a sudden to get this stuff taken care of and to be competent in these areas that was so easy for me to be competent in, 5-10 years ago? And what we got to in that session when we were talking about this is, you know what? Her system had reached its limit. We can only get so far on discipline. We can only get so far grinding and hustling. We can only get so far pushing our way to the next level. Your nervous system eventually is going to rebel against force until the harder you push, the more inconsistent you become. The harder you push, the worse you do. And so once it starts like, we're moving in one direction and we're getting our goals, and we push and we push and we push. And then after a certain point, we push more and we get nowhere. We get less accomplished. So then add in the shame that this creates. We feel like a failure. We feel like, gosh, what? Must be defective. I used to be able to swing this and I can't anymore. So you've got shame into the cycle now, and you're pushing harder and doing worse. And what you really need is a system reset. Your system needs safety. It needs to know that you're not going to push yourself until you're flat on your back and can't move anymore. I mean, I was marveling the other day. I got the message during childhood that unless I was just like almost in the hospital, I wasn't going to get the attention I needed, and I wasn't going to be able to stop pushing so hard. And I saw my parents do the same thing. Like both my parents went into the hospital multiple times for different stress-induced situations. And it's like, oh, well, no wonder as a little girl, I learned that that's when you're allowed to stop and take care of yourself, is when you actually physically can't move anymore. And I know I'm not alone in that. I have so many clients who have told me, gosh, that's what I learned too. Unless you're physically in the hospital, I mean, there's a really awesome and terrible movie called Bad Moms, and in that movie, I am neither recommending it nor am I not recommending it, but I love Kristen Bell, and her character in there is sharing in the middle of it. She's got like 5 kids and like baby twins, and she's like not coping well. Okay, and she's like, "Do you ever have this dream where you just like imagine," she's like, "I just imagine that I'm in a car accident, but it's like not fatal, but it's bad enough that I have to go to the hospital, and then my husband has to take care of the kids for 2 weeks, and they just feed me Jello." And she has this whole thing really carefully and creepily thought out about what it's going to be like when she finally gets a break. And that is the mentality that so many of us grow up with, that it's like discipline is good, taking breaks is bad, unless you go into this scenario that she's creating in the movie where you like can't actually do anything. You actually have to physically, and then you have a reason to take a break. So your nervous system needs to understand that you're not going to be in shame for slowing down a little bit and making things more predictable. And for when there is, resistance in you, or when the discipline starts to wane, we stop and explore that, and we get curious about it instead of shaming and judging it. So predictability and pacing yourself is what creates safety, not intensity. I think the go big or go home. I say this thing. I don't think people say this anymore, but like to go gangbusters. I'm pretty sure that's something from the 90s. But to really go big or go home is something that most high achievers can relate to, that we learned this black and white thinking that if it's intensity, then it is good, hard work, and then we will be rewarded. But our system cannot operate in intensity all the time. And when you hit that goal, or when you hit that wall where you were successful and now you're not, like this is what is going to help. The consistency, the predictability, the safety, not the intensity. Consistency really comes from rhythm, not just overt pressure. We don't need to just push in one unilateral direction. Consistency comes from understanding the cycles, of the human body, the human spirit, our stress drive loop. We have to watch out for that stress drive loop that I've brought up in some of the YouTube trainings that are here on the channel, because if you are being driven by an emergency system that was only designed to help you in case of emergency, but that becomes your norm, everything burns out really quickly. So we have to come from a rhythm that says we need to rest. Our sympathetic nervous system response, let's get nerdy here for a second. Sympathetic nervous system is fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And that nervous system response is in case of emergency, when your system perceives a life or death threat. Problem is, your system can't tell between like, whoa, I almost just got in an accident in my car, and oh my gosh, I'm running for my life from a saber-toothed tiger. It does not know the difference between the two. It doesn't know that in one case, it's like safe to just shake it off and move on. And in the other case, it's like, we need to get going and we need to turn on all of our life-saving systems. So all the life-saving systems come on, the executive functions, the higher level thinking and decision-making turns off, and your immune system turns off. There's a lot of systems that turn off when you're in survival mode. And so when that's happening, in order to be able to push and have discipline, I'm using air quotes, that kind of pressure is not what we were designed to function in forever, and you will hit a wall. So regulation in your nervous system, not telling yourself with words, but like giving your body evidence, giving your nervous system evidence, we are safe here. It's okay to take our time doing this goal. It is okay to take a break before it's totally finished. It's okay to do things ahead of time that are not motivated by adrenaline and cortisol at the last minute. Your regulation allows the effort to feel neutral instead of draining. And this is where the safety comes in instead of the discipline. This is how habits actually stick. So if you've been depending on willpower and discipline in order to accomplish your goals, and you're really understanding that this is no longer sustainable for you, I want you to try a micro reset here. So the first thing is to look at whatever the goal is that you're trying to accomplish, and you soften your expectations before you dive in and increase your effort. And you want to remind yourself, I have nothing to prove through discipline. I have nothing to prove. And you breathe and you send a message of slowness to your sympathetic nervous system. And then your parasympathetic nervous system, that's in charge of the rest and digest cycle. You can go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and then pull it back and go into the rest and digest cycle, giving 3 deep breaths, giving evidence to your body like, hey, we're not actually running from a wild animal here. We wouldn't be able to breathe slow if we were. So if you want help building the habits that don't require force, ladies can book a free 15-minute chat with me at ElyssaSmith.com/focus, where we will take apart the exact things that are underneath the pushing response and the moving forward at all costs and self-abandoning tendencies that we have. You can also download my free guide for women. It's a PDF guide, 5 nervous system hacks that you can do at your desk to start building in nervous system safety in little tiny increments that will be sustainable and help you with your consistency and your goals. Until next time, take such good care of yourself.